Hey, what's going on guys? Aram Case here, and today I'm going to be doing a review of this Blackmagic design micro panel. I know this thing been out for a little while, actually for almost a year now, and there's some reviews online talking about this one and the mini panel, but I figured I'm actually going to do this thing a fair test before I'm gonna jump on a YouTube board and start just, talking nonsense about all the features and whatnot without really properly testing this. So I personally had this model for about 2 months. It's a micro panel that costs $1,000. Before I was using a third-party panels for my workflow, but I decided to give this panel a try. What is the cool thing about having this panel, and what is the bad thing about purchasing this panel? Well, let's start with the positive. First of all, this thing is really built like a tank. It has very nice solid plastic from what it feels. It's very expensive feel to it. It's actually relatively heavy, but I mean, from the size of this thing, you kind of can expect this thing to be not super featherweight. It's aluminum in the back, or how some of us say aluminum, depending where you're from. Basically, this panel is a very good working tool if you're on the go. And personally, for a lot of the workflow that I do, and besides color grading, I actually do cinematography and photography, and a lot of times I actually do work on set. This thing is actually very good for me. And one of the reasons that this particular panel does not need auxiliary power. It only powers through USB-C, which is actually great because when you're working in a remote location, such as desert and stuff, sometimes getting access to power is a little bit pain in the butt, so having this thing powered straight from USB is actually a huge bonus for me. Remember, what's bonus for me may not be bonus for you. If you establish colorist or you want to do color grading like your career, you always probably much better choice of getting a full mini panel, because the mini panel will serve you much better in the long run, since it has a lot of extra features that this panel doesn't have. And one of the big things that this panel is missing, and for many people it's going to be pretty much game over, is the fact that this panel doesn't have creating a new node, layer node, serial node, and parallel node as the buttons. So you kind of still have to use your keyboard if you want to work freely with this panel, which is actually a big drawback, I'll be honest. However, since I do a lot of photo retouching and stuff like that, in my particular setup, I don't see this thing to be as much of a drawback, because I kind of figure out how to work in my own environment, so this thing works for me. Should I recommend this panel to anybody? Of course, this panel is amazing. Quality is great, there's a lot of good features on this, and in 1 second I'm actually going to take you inside Davinci Resolve, and I'm going to put camera right on top of the panel. That way you guys can see how this panel can be covered in the real life color grading situation, and whether the buttons that you probably need are here for what I'm going to be doing, so you kind of can see a real life scenario of me using this thing. So let's jump really quick inside Davinci Resolve and give this thing a spin. Okay guys, so we're here now in Davinci Resolve, and I'm going to show you how to use this panel and what it looks like, what I'm doing. I'm going to be sharing both screens, that way you kind of can see what we're dealing here with, so you kind of make your own decision based if you really need this panel or not. And I know it's still a YouTube video online, whatever, but I hope this will give you a little better idea of what's going on with this panel. So I'm going to try to cover as much as I can, so you can make good decision if you want to buy this thing or not. Anyways, so let's jump on the screen over here, and you can see that I have this little footage that I shot with the iPhone 8 Plus. So this came straight from the phone. It's just a little basic footage, and as you can see, I click playback and we can play this clip. And for example, if you work on the clip and you kind of want to do a repeat of multiple playbacks of the same thing, you can push the button loop over here, and basically our clip gonna be looping infinite amount of times. Anyways, so we have 3 wheels over here. As we know, each of those wheels shadow, midtones, highlights, and each of those basically corresponds to the wheels on the screen we have in Davinci Resolve. And as you can see, if I'm pulling those, the controls go crazy all over the place. And if I want to reset the adjustments that I've done, all I have to do is just click on top of each wheel where it says reset all. So basically, this thing is very straightforward. Now, controls on top. The first three controls, we have Y lift, Y gamma, Y gain. Basically, they're the same like RGB wheels. Instead, they just responsible for luminosity. So if you want to do more finesse adjustments just in Luma, you can do pretty much with these buttons. And if you push on a button, you reset all your adjustments. So let's say I cranked it up way too much and I want to reset it, boom, and it takes back to original settings. Next one, we have contrast, pivot, and midtone details. So again, very easy to dial with the contrast. You have your pivot, and it makes the workflow in general very fast and fluent. And of course, we have midtone details right over here. Again, I'm gonna reset this thing. Next three wheels, we have color boost, shadows, and highlights. Those, of course, you know, they're basic recovery tools. If you want to bring more details from the shadows, I crank it up over here. If we want to do more highlights, I crank it up here. So let's reset all those things. Next one, we have saturation, hue, and Luma mix. So saturation, again, we can saturate a lot, and if we don't like it, reset it. Hue, we can just rotate. If we want to kind of go 90s music video, we can play with the hue. So these are all the top buttons. The cool thing about this panel that if I'm going to turn off the light, we can actually see the buttons are glowing. And the button that you push, like for example, if I'm going to push the viewer button, which is going to make it full screen, it actually glows stronger than the ones that not pressed. And we can see it by the loop button. So if you want to come back, again, push it back, and we're back to normal operation. Next thing, very important. A lot of people don't see the temperature controls in Tint. However, this thing exists in this panel. And all you have to do is push offset button. And now your regular three wheels turn into something else. The third wheel, which is highlights, becomes your offset wheel. So as you can see on the screen, I'm offsetting the entire thing. Okay? So let's reset that. The middle wheel becomes your tint. Let me go really quick into this so you can see. And as you can see here, I'm actually adjusting the tint of the image. Again, let's reset it. And the first wheel, you guessed it right, it becomes your temperature. So once you're spinning it, you're basically adjusting the white balance of the shot. A little bit strange because you sort of have to go into sub-menu by pressing the offset, but it's there. So if you want to do more finesse adjustments, you pretty much have this opportunity. Let's get out of here. Next one, we have log. If you like editing in log, basically you can do more finesse adjustments in the log. Especially if it's very useful, I guess, if you're working with the ACES footage. Okay, so let's reset the whole thing. Now over here, there's only few really good buttons over here that I use all the times. One of them is to grab still. So we grab the still image. That way we can apply later to a different clip. Reset. It resets the node. So let's say I've done some crazy adjustment over here and I can reset it. Disable. This one temporarily disables particular node on and off. So if you want to see what kind of adjustments you've done, you can really toggle between on and off. Okay. And finally, bypass. Bypass is really cool. Like if you created a bunch of different looks and you have no idea, you know, what it looks before, you just click bypass and it takes you to original state of the picture. Now, the negative side. As you see, I have to literally use my keyboard to create a new node. It's not too much problem for me because I have the keyboard right on my left, so everything's sort of within my reach of operation. However, it would be nice if they would add 3 buttons right over here. That being said, it's clearly a marketing technique. They try to upsell your product because if this if this micro panel would have those 3 buttons over here, I say pretty much you really don't need to buy a mini panel that costs $3,000 because this little thing would do just fine. Anyways, a couple more buttons over here, previous and the next note. You can kind of toggle between. You can do frame by frame, which is also really cool. And you can do clips, previous and the next clip. So that's about it with this panel. I think it's overall very cool panel to have, especially if you work as a cinematographer or you do any kind of DIT or color work on set. And the fact that this panel doesn't need to have auxiliary power to power this whole thing makes it very excellent and portable. Size-wise, I mean, you can kind of expect it's pretty chunky little piece. It's not too crazy. Again, if you're a cinematographer or photographer or anything like that, you kind of should have a backpack that can accommodate this panel right over here. And in overall, I think it's a very great thing. It's a very great panel, and I highly recommend to have this panel for anybody who's in a film business. So thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you soon.